Okay, here at IRT, catching up with Peter Huntington from KER. Firstly, Pete, welcome back.
Hi, Paul.
Something very, very different here today, but one, we've got to say thank you to the team here at IRT for allowing us to do it in their offices, and hopefully Lockie's going to take me for a bit of a walk later on. But springtime is an incredibly busy time for racehorses, full stop. Racing really starts to hot up, and it's going to start hotting up after next weekend. But there's a lot goes on behind the scenes, and you've been, I suppose, at the forefront this year with a horse called Romantic Warrior. That's one of the favourites, I think, for the Cox Plate. Is that right?
Cox Plate, yeah.
Yeah, coming out here for the Cox Plate. There's, I suppose, a bit of an issue with the feed, and you had to basically redesign another feed for this horse.
Yeah, well, so because of Australia's quarantine regulations, you can't just bring the feed with you. So you certainly can't bring any hay, so you'll feed Australian hay. They can bring supplements if the buckets aren't opened, generally. But with feed, feed has to be irradiated to kill any weed seeds, principally. And some feeds, it doesn't work. They don't work very well after irradiation, so people choose not to bring the feed. And that was the case with the Romantic Warrior, so they put him onto a feed, another Australian feed, but the horse didn't eat it that well in quarantine. So that got everybody worried, and then I think, just a few days before he's due to fly, I sort of got a call and said, can you do something? And yes, we did, managed to design a feed that was similar to the feed that he was normally on in Hong Kong, and get it made here by Pet Horse and Farm, who are one of the suppliers for quarantine, and they're happy to make small volume custom batches. And then the horse got here, he was a little bit standoffish for the first feed, but then he started tucking into it, and his travelling companion bolted into it straight away. So
I'm going to go back a couple of steps.
Radiation.
Yep.
X-rays. So feed has to be, that's part of the biosecurity to make sure you kill weed seeds. That's what people are worried about. It's either weed seeds or viruses. So we're looking to kill those seeds particularly. And with some feeds, especially the ones that have got a lot of molasses in them, that can cook it a bit and make it smell like Christmas cake, and the horses don't always like that. So we've been doing these sort of custom feeds for horses from Europe for many years. Some people still bring their own feed. They're happy to go through the cost and potential upset of that process, but with others we've designed feeds that are, I guess you'd say, images. They're not exactly the same, but they're images of the feeds they're on in Europe. And this was an instance where it was from Hong Kong, and that was an American feed.
Well, that was the next part I was going to say. The interesting part of this horse is in Hong Kong, but on an American feed. Forgive my ignorance, do they make feeds in Hong Kong? Do they import all their feeds?
No, they're all imported. So there's some Australian feeds, there's some European feeds, and the majority are American feeds. And we've got some feeds of our own in Hong Kong that some trainers use, and this feed was another American feed. It was the sort of most popular feed there, and for a number of reasons that wasn't approved to come here, so we made, I suppose you'd say, a facsimile of it.
It's quite intriguing in itself, the fact that Hong Kong, all their feeds are imported. I mean, obviously put a great expense onto them, but I would imagine for you guys too, you then dealing with an international jurisdiction, a very busy jurisdiction as well, quite regularly. I would say you'd be called on. I mean, I only heard about this basically through the radio, and I was like, hang on, there's a story here because of what actually going on, but there's so many more stories that come out of it.
Yeah, well, we've been selling feed to Hong Kong for years. They're great to the Jockey Club. They've now got a base in China, so they ship, most of the feed goes to Hong Kong, and then some goes up into China. There are feeds made in China, but they can't necessarily get into Hong Kong. And so we work with a company in Beijing making feed over there. And so one of my colleagues is actually at the Asian Games in Hangzhou, which is where their feed is. They're the feed supplier there. The feed's being used. But yeah, for this situation, it's something we've done before. Each one's a little bit different with these feeds, and some of them are challenges around raw materials that are commonly used in Europe or America that we don't have here, because your average sort of racing feed that you have here will, and I've just got an example there.
I'll take a photo of it or something anyway, yeah.
Of it, Paul, Barrow-stock furlong, new feed, and things that we put in these feeds like sunflower seeds and lupins are good ingredients, but they don't use them overseas. So you've got the risk that the horse will not like the the ingredients that it's not used to. And the European and American feeds use a lot of sugar beet pulp. They sometimes use soybean hulls. And other sort of super fibre sources. Interestingly, their oats are usually not quite as good as ours. We've got better quality oats, and the corn can be treated differently. This American feed had cracked corn in it, whereas normally you would put steam flaked or micronized corn. The European ones do.
Which we used to do cracked many moons ago, but now we don't. It doesn't seem to be anywhere, does it?
No, that's right. Well, there are some people still use it, and there are perhaps some benefits in terms of palatability and things like that. But, so there's many different ways to feed horses well, but I think the main thing is to keep them eating. And so we're making a feed that's made very freshly. It was made on a Thursday and the horse arrived on a Saturday. So in a small batch, it's fresh. It wasn't a big change in terms of ingredients, and so you want the horse to eat. And that's the key thing. We started doing this, I think Bauer, who ran second in the Melbourne Cup to Viewed in a photo, was the first time we did it, where we designed a feed to mimic what Luca Comani was feeding in England. And that horse just got beaten, and have made custom feeds for years. Red Cadeau, who multiple second place getter, was on one. And interesting, that's an interesting story, because the year he got beaten by Protectionist was meant to be on Australian feed or an imported feed, I can't remember which one, but he wasn't eating, and he was in the same barn as Red Cadeau, and the Red Cadeau people, Rob and Trevor Jones, lent them some of their feed. Protectionist started eating, and then he beat them in the Melbourne Cup. So
he had enough energy to get past them. They wouldn't have been happy. How do you go about it? Well, actually, one step for a second. Kentucky Equine Research is started in Kentucky. I know they're a worldwide company now. Did they supply this horse's American feed, or was it another company that fed this horse?
Well, it was another manufacturing. We don't manufacture.
Of course, you don't supplements. So yeah.
Yeah, ourselves. It was a company in Kentucky that was making the feed that we know well, and and that feed was then shipped to Hong Kong. So we had a bit of an idea about what was in the feed. We had a bit of a head start, whereas sometimes when you design these feeds, you don't really, you know the nutrient content, but you don't know the ingredient proportions. And I try and mimic the ingredient proportions when you're making an image feed.
I've got so many questions. If you, this one you said there was a little bit easier because you would, I gather, the guys from Kentucky Equine in America would have been able to facilitate you with different feeds and their
information.
Yeah, which would make it a lot easier.
Yes.
Those ones that you don't know, do you jump on a plane and go over and physically look at the feed, or how do you go about it?
Okay, well, we try what we've done there. There's a couple of things that happen. There are some English companies who've been happy to share the formulation with me. So we sign a confidentiality agreement, and they go, well, this is the formulation, and we go, well, we can make it. We haven't got all of those ingredients, but we can make a pretty good copy or an image of it. And other times you have to do it you do it on the nutrient content, and then you've got a list of the ingredients, and then you've got a photo, and so you're trying to, and I did one this year for a horse that's going to Sydney, and it looks, at least photographically, it looks to have turned out to be a reasonable image of the existing feed.
That must be something for the guys here in Victoria. I don't know if they make the Sydney feed, if you've got it getting made in Sydney, but it must be
the same people.
Yeah,
the same people make the feed. Yeah.
Must be so. I might have to go and have a look. It must be so hard for them to say, all right, we've got to at the end of the day, we've got to make everything, the nutrient quality and the protein levels, everything else the same, but we've also got to get it looking like this same picture. It must be pretty tricky for them.
Well, and you want to get it smelling. For the horse, the smell of the feed
Yeah.
is really important. So this American feed is very heavy in molasses, so we use more molasses than we normally would. The European feeds are less so, but you've got to make sure you use the same sort of oil that they would use over there. So here we would use more canola oil in feeds, and there they use soybean oil. So we made sure we use soybean oil. Try and get the molasses content right, the stickiness right, and it seems to work out pretty well. Sometimes it's about getting an appropriate pelleted feed or cube feed, because there's a lot more of those fed to racehorses in Europe than there is here, and so we're looking at a similar sort of feed. So there's a feed we've had, low GI cube that's can be a breeding feed, can be a performance feed, can be a racing feed, and it's been fed to a number of horses that have run placings in the Melbourne Cup, and people go, you look at that, it's not a racing feed, but it can be, and it is. So we've got a Marmello and Spanish Mission, both place getters, did it on that feed. So
Serious on low GI.
Low GI, yeah.
Yeah. Because it is a great feed if you've got horses doing rehab in boxes, because it doesn't give them a spike in energy. It's it's what it is.
Yes, it's a slower release energy feed, and that suited the style of training of those horses. There are a few people who use it over here, but it's a matter, as I said, there's a lot of different ways you can feed a horse well, but the key thing is to get the horse eating.
You said there before about molasses. Is it like corn? Is it different in America to Australia? Because I know sometimes different companies, some horses won't, drink anyway molasses from some companies as compared to others. Yeah,
the molasses is a little bit different. So Americans use the sort of the blackstrap molasses, which is thick and gooey, especially in the winter. Here, for convenience, we're using a processed molasses where the molasses is mixed with a little bit of oil. Whereas they do it over there, they mix it themselves and put a bit more oil in winter to make sure it flows. But the molasses here is a processed form to make it easier to work with.
What is the main part to get right? You said there before about the smell, and like I know horses are so sensitive. Am I right in saying they basically only have two types of taste, if you like sweet and sour? It's not necessarily that way, but the taste is not as important as potentially the smell?
If I knew what stopped horses eating and made them start eating, Paul, I probably could be on an island and putting the feet up and having a pina colada. I think it's a combination. I think smell's pretty important. Taste obviously is as well. I don't think we really know, the detail of how horses, of what drives their taste. And there are some horses, we generally think the sweeter the feed, the more molasses on the outside, the better they'll eat it, but some don't, and it's often what they're used to.
Yeah.
They're creatures of habit, and unlike, we'd like to have different dinner every night. I think the horse probably is better off if they have something pretty similar.
Yeah. That is one thing I know a lot of people, there's some of the best trainers, they're all about consistency. They don't change. Even if they give them a day off, they don't cut any feed out, because the horses just like that consistent feed all the time.
Oh, well, if you give them a day off, I think you've got to cut the volume back, though.
Yep.
Otherwise you've got a risk of tying up.
Yep. So feed the same, but just less of each.
Feed the same, but less, yeah. Like if you're having, Sunday off, give them a half dinner Saturday night, half breakfast Sunday morning, and then normal feed again Sunday night would be what I would do.
How rewarding is it for you to know that Romantic Warrior, when it came over here, and I believe the first night at 8 didn't savage the feed bin, but by the second day they were wrapped with how rewarding is that, not just for you, but I would imagine for KER and the company as a whole?
Oh yeah, it's very gratifying. You're sort of doing your best to try and solve a problem, and when it works out, it's not just us, it's Pet Horse and Farm who do a good job at making the feed at short notice. I think I had some discussions on a Tuesday evening, and then by Wednesday morning it was confirmed that they wanted it, and we got a formula, and then the feed got made on the Thursday and delivered to Werribee, and the horse arrived on the Saturday. So it's a pretty good service.
Absolutely.
Service by James Vanderpoel down Pet Horse and Farm.
That's an amazing turnaround, and then to have the horse eat, and it must be so good again, like we're here at IRT, but to travel horses to Australia from Hong Kong on an American feed, to know that they can get what basically as close as a mimic to what they're getting over there with a horse. I would imagine by the sounds must be a little bit of a finicky eater as well.
Yes.
So
yeah.
it's got to be good for Australian relations, full stop.
Well, Hong Kong Jockey Club, there's a lot of prestige involved in, setting a horse out. They haven't sent horses here to run too often, so there's a little bit of stress about all of that. And it's important. If the horse gets here and doesn't eat, then you're not going to be able to train it, and if you can't train it, then it won't be fit enough. And that's a real chance for the Cox Plate, that horse. But there'll be other horses come this year who run in the Melbourne Cup, and some going to Sydney. So there's a few feeds have gone up to Sydney for their horses coming to run in the Golden Eagle and those sort of races. So I think we've done 3 feeds. I don't know the name of the horses. Or one of them, Jimi Hendrix, I do know that one.
What a great name.
Jimi Hendrix, that one sticks to mind. We've done a feed for Jimi Hendrix.
And that's, as I said, it suits here with IRT as well, being able to fly them. And I know the European flight is actually what's going to land in Australia, I think Saturday in Sydney, and then to here.
Gets here grand final day.
Wow.
And then there's a second flight in October for 2 weeks after. Comes out for people who don't want to come for as long. It's been going on for a number of years. IRT do a great job in terms of the preparation of the horses, and it's a matter of, part of it would be acclimatising them to the hay in Europe that they might be feeding here, because when you change feeds, colic is always one of your risks, and the biggest thing there is probably a change of hay is the biggest risk, or a massive change in the amount of grain that you're feeding or type. But the hay is a big one, so we're trying to get a hay here. We can't get exactly the same hay because some of the grasses they grow over there, or the hays they like Timothy hay is the biggest hay for racehorses around the world, made in Western US, Washington and Oregon, that would be fed in Hong Kong, but we don't have Timothy hay here, so we've got to get a grass hay that's as close to Timothy hay.
So Timothy hay is predominantly a grass hay, or?
Well, Timothy is a grass. It's a species of grass, but it doesn't grow here.
Yeah.
Won't grow. And it's a great hay. It stays nice and green, palatable. It is probably the number one hay for racehorses. So here we've got lucerne hay. Well, that's different. That's a legume, so different. And then the grass hays can be very, very variable. You can get some very nice grass hays, but then you get some average ones too. And last season wasn't a great year for haymaking, so having enough of good quality hay stuck away was a very important part of the preparation. So again, Pet Horse and Farm have got some good sources of hay for these horses coming out here.
There's so many other factors, because people might say, well, there was so much grass around last year, but it was so wet.
And it was wet. It rained when they were making the hay, and it got ruined. So, there'll be people running out of hay before we get this season's hay.
Yeah, I'm in Central Victoria, and I'm well and truly aware there are a lot of people already saying we're in trouble for hay. And we then got to have this year to grow as well. So, yeah.
Well, this year's it'll be harvested early. It's been so dry.
Yeah.
Grass will go to seed. We'll get it harvested early. So it's so there's that aspect too. Sometimes there are supplements that they can't get, and we try and advise on the right sort of supplement. Usually recommend one of ours where we can. But
that just on that, where you can. So obviously you're there to facilitate and to help them. But if KER don't have, if there is another company that have a supplement that might be closer, you will
recommend that. Yes.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, you're doing what's best for the horse. I mean, one of KER's mottos is to try and feed horses better so they're healthy and more productive. So we're looking out for the horse, number one. Yeah,
and Barrostock or Ridley over here, horse comes first. I mean, it's a great motto. They are great mottos, and it's probably something that IRT with IRT. It's quite interesting because I have a standard bred background, and I know Duncan McPherson just flew a horse to America, Aldebaran Zeus, who ran 5th in the international at Yonkers, a huge race over there, and he said he couldn't have done it without the help of IRT, and the feed companies because they know who to deal with over there. So it's a huge undertaking flying horses out here, that not just having them fit, having the right jockey and right track conditions, that so much goes on behind the scenes.
Absolutely, and it's a matter of, IT have been doing it for a long time. They're very professional at it, and do a very good job. But, there's plenty of things can go wrong. Travel sickness.
Yeah.
5% of horses travelling for more than 24 hours in the old days, could get travel sickness, can be life-threatening.
Yeah.
It's usually, pleuritis. So those sort of things are the right veterinary preparation there, the right veterinary supervision in terms of monitoring temperatures when they're on the flight, having dust-free hay when they're on the plane to reduce the risk of dust inhalation, trying to get them to have their heads down, these sort of things. It's a bit easier on flights these days, where you're not stacking them in quite as much. It's not 4 to a pallet. And, and so but a key thing is getting them here quickly. And I know there was one year where I think the windscreen cracked in the Middle East somewhere when they were coming out, and that was a touch and go whether they had to take the horses off, and if they had to take them off, then big quarantine issues, and you want to keep the horses cool on the flight. That's a really important part. I mean, Lockie can talk more about that, but it's there's a lot of learned experience to avoid problems, and particularly when they're going to run again so quickly.
Yeah,
they're flying. Those of us who've flown to Europe know you get off and you wouldn't necessarily want to be an athlete again.
Yeah.
So soon afterwards.
Knocks them around. Water, and when we talk about nutrition and nutritional values, I know water is one of those things that people are looking a lot more into. How important is that for horses travelling like from Hong Kong to here, or is that something that you can mimic a little bit closer?
One of the things people do is they'll weigh the horse, and you're looking to minimise the weight loss and get the horse back to their previous weight as quickly as possible. And a lot of that's dehydration. And dehydration is partly, because they're not drinking as much. So it's a matter of feeding them enough. One of the things that stimulates thirst is hay consumption, but you don't want to overfill them full of hay. So but you want to have water that they want to drink. And then when they get here, some electrolyte supplementation. So IRT use, we get an electrolyte paste, restore paste. They use that on horses that arrive. And the elevation in plasma sodium stimulates the horse to drink.
Yeah. So there is so many parts of it. Do you go to Werribee? Do you go out and see the horses, or is it your job done once you get the feed and you get the feedback?
I have been out there at different times, but it's a quarantine setup, so it's a bit complicated there. So to get in, getting in and out, and it's all the showering in and like that. So I've done it, but we try and set the feed up in advance, and then
let everything else go and get the feedback.
Follow on from that.
You're an animal lover, I know that for a fact. Do you love the racing side of it, or is it more so around I suppose probably trying to improve horses as a general that you drives Peter Huntington?
Oh no, I'm very interested in the racing. Horses that you had an involvement with. We're very involved in some breeding farms, so sometimes it's horses you fed as foals or in utero, things like that. I don't go to the races all the time, but I'm certainly be watching them and reading about them, and we'll try and be there a few times in Melbourne Cup Week at Flemington.
Yeah, I've seen you at horse events like Barristock and the likes. You get to those, and they are just as important. You say there about the Olympics and things along those lines. So I would imagine you guys are constantly evolving, I suppose, and constantly learning as well.
Yeah, you never stop learning with horses. That's one thing. So that's one of the interesting things about it, is that you don't stop learning. So I'm very happy to still be involved. I've been horse vet for over 40 years. And doing nutrition pretty solidly for 30 of them, and I've still got plenty to learn. So
you're a qualified vet?
Yes.
So you're a vet first, and then you've moved basically to the nutritional side of things.
Yes.
That's great.
Well, I sort of thought originally, Paul, it'd be a better, more family-friendly lifestyle, because you didn't have to work nights and weekends. hasn't quite worked out. But,
I would imagine there'd be long hours overnight when you're talking to people during the daytimes and trying to get to catch it up.
Yes, those long hours and travel and all those sort of things. But you go to some interesting places when you travel, and not so much in the last few years, but we're getting back on the bandwagon a bit soon. So.
Yeah, well, and I suppose that would have changed a lot of things. I suppose that's made, we talk about COVID and not being able to travel, so you would have had to work different ways. I'm pretty sure it was KER and Ridley. They actually basically were people were having trouble. They were getting people to video how their horses were eating, what they were eating, and things along those lines. So I would imagine some parts of that probably makes it a little bit easier, but also makes it a bit harder for you as well.
Well, it does. We've done a lot of education over the years. You used to go somewhere and do seminars, and people would come and listen to you. But then with COVID and the development of Zoom, we'd never heard of Zoom before COVID, and you can do webinars, so it's easy. And we were doing them in the height of COVID. We'd do webinars here, and we'd have people from 20 countries logged onto them. So that's greater amplification of use of your time, and a message about feeding horses better can be spread further around the world than just a talk at Bendigo at Juniton at the Bendigo trotting track, where you're going to get people from the local area.
Yeah, you get out to a larger audience, and go from there. But I must say the face-to-face ones, the flip side of that is you probably get more interaction, positive interaction, maybe from one or two people, because they may not have tuned into a Zoom, but to physically be able to see there and throw that one curly one at you, and they get an answer, and then you go from there.
The curly ones are interesting too.
Oh, they are indeed. KER is a worldwide company that must make it a lot easier as well to be able to, I suppose, deal with other countries and get an understanding from other countries as well.
Yes, because we've got a presence in those other countries. So we've got, we work with a really good client in England, so Saracen Horse Feeds, and so the Jimi Hendrix feed, that horse was on their feed, and so they've said, well, this is exactly what the feed was, and we can make a feed that's very similar to that.
Yep.
So that helps us. We understand American feeds, and we understand the hays people use and different feeding practices. So, I've been lucky enough to probably visit 20-odd countries to talk about horse nutrition for 30 years. So.
I think it's great, Pete, and as I said, I was lucky enough just to be listening on the radio and happened to see it or hear it the other day, and I thought, here is a great story, and I am sponsored by Barristock. KER are affiliated with those guys, but I think this is just one for horse people in general to be able to be aware. And I imagine if people have any queries, to get in touch with you guys at KER would be the best way to with their nutrition. I mean, it's not always that easy, but that'd be the starting point.
We've got a good advice service that, if they're sort of veterinary related issues, they'll tend to come to me, but they've got other people who are very experienced nutrition advisors try and help. And the advice may be something around forage. We don't have a stake in that. It may be about feed, or it may be supplementation. Often people are using the wrong supplements, too many supplements. We try and make it simple. The other thing I'd mention is our Equinews, our website. It's got a fantastic educational resource called Equinews, there's tens of thousands of articles on nutrition, feeding, health, and other things related to horses. And they're short articles. They're not written by scientists, so they're or vets, so they're easy to understand.
Yep.
Yeah, Mark Llewellyn's been the Equinews editor for years, and you can search under a particular topic there. And you'll get, if you search under gastric ulcers, you probably get 30 articles, that sort of thing, of new information over the years. And we've also got a newsletter, electronic newsletter, that you can sign up for. It comes out fortnightly with 3 articles. That's a fantastic resource of information that is readily accessible. And one of the incredible, and one of the problems with the rise of the internet is that people think you Google something and it's what you get is correct.
Dr. Google.
Dr. Google. And Dr. Google, it's not always right.
No.
And just because something's up there, and just because somebody says, has a website that looks smart or has a blog or something like that, it doesn't mean they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of that in horse nutrition. There's a lot of people who aren't qualified, aren't experienced enough, and are giving bad advice.
put a flashy bag, flashy hats, and
all
go
that
from
sort
there.
of thing. Yeah. And so I think what we're offering there is
And off now with Peter's, people might be aware the camera might have just stopped there. I encourage people to go to KER's website, the American one, to just understand the depths that they go to. I suppose in their research with the nappies, and I actually love the way that they look after each of the horses. Each horse is named. You can follow their horses' journeys and what they do. So it's not just, as you were saying there before, about being creditable with being a credible, reputable organisation, if you like, but it's also the research that does go behind it. You guys put it out there and back up the research that you are doing, because it's there to be seen on the KER website. And I'm pretty sure you're going to help me out. KER, I think it's just KER.com, I think.
KER.com,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information there, and research underpins what we do, and there's many unsolved problems or things we need to know more about in horse nutrition and exercise physiology. We've been doing it for 35 years, and outside the universities, we're definitely the biggest equine nutrition researcher, and we think that's a really important part of what we do. We've got our base in central Kentucky in Versailles, which Australians would pronounce as Americans pronounce as Versailles. We would pronounce it as Versailles, not far from Lexington, and home of the Red Mile.
Yep.
And we've also got a performance centre in Florida where we've got a racetrack there, so we can actually do work on horses that are in full training, and that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that backs up more the credibility.
We've got this great herd of old research horses, so we'd be really well placed to do work on old horses.
But they are from every different range too, aren't they? There's ex-race horses. When I last looked at it, there's also eventing horses. They were champion eventing horses that they've got another home. You get a lot of people say about research with animals, and they think it's cruel. This is life after work, and it's a great life.
Well looked after, They're all horses that were race horses for Joe Pagan, for Joe, and they've found a home in a research sense later on.
Pete, thank you. Thank you very much for giving us a little bit of insight into what goes on, and well done to KER and everyone involved as well. I forgot the name of the feed company. You're going to help me out that's made the feed?
Pet Horse and Farm.
Pet Horse and Farm.
They're at Bannockburn or Keilor.
Make sure you go and check those guys out as well if you've got any issues, I would imagine, because the research they're doing behind the scenes as well would be awesome.
They make custom feeds for a number of trainers, and also make them for do a nice job. Fresh feeds. Having fresh feeds, I think, is really important for horses, and they'll put some nice feeds together. Usually, mix of grains and some pellets and things like that. But there's a whole variety of them out there.
Oh, thank you. Make sure you get in touch with the guys at Kentucky Equine as well, and go from there. Pete, thank you. Really appreciate taking a bit of time to give us a bit of an insight, mate. I know you've got to go and look at some horses and mares and foals, I would imagine, today in yearlings, so really do appreciate it. And thank you very much to the guys from IRT for allowing us to film this here, and hopefully Lockie might give me a bit of a guided tour in a minute about the facilities downstairs. I might have a double whammy while I'm here.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, simple.